Across the frostbitten plains, the wind howled like a chorus of tormented souls. Snow swept through the air in endless spirals, cloaking the world in a deathly silence. Upon this barren expanse rode a figure both magnificent and dreadful, the Bone Knight, a being neither living nor dead. His armor, sculpted from blackened steel and adorned with forgotten runes, gleamed faintly beneath the ghostly light of a pale moon. Upon his skeletal face, no expression stirred, for his flesh had long since decayed, leaving only the will of vengeance to drive him onward. Beneath him prowled Frostbane, the wolf of winter, a beast of impossible size, its fur as white as the deepest snowdrifts, its eyes glowing with the light of ancient stars. Chains of silver and gold bound relics to its flanks, each a trophy from battles long past, each soaked in the blood of those foolish enough to challenge its master. Together, they were a myth carried on the icy winds, the guardians of a forsaken realm, where the souls of oath-breakers and betrayers wandered, forever lost. But who was this specter of vengeance? Once the Bone Knight had been known by another name, Sir Kaelin of Avarn, sworn defender of the northern realms. In life he had been noble and loyal, beloved by his people, and devoted to the king he served. But kings are mortal, and mortals are frail. Jealous hearts whispered lies into the king's ear, and a throne grown cold knows no mercy. Kaelin was betrayed by those he trusted most, falsely accused and cast into the abyss of frost for crimes he did not commit. There, amid the eternal blizzard, he perished. But death did not claim him kindly. Something older and crueler than the gods heard his final, desperate vow, a vow of vengeance. This ancient power raised him from the dead, forging him anew in hatred and sorrow. He became the Bone Knight, a sleepless guardian bound to the north by his thirst for justice. Centuries passed, and his tragic tale faded from memory into myth. But the north remembers. Now, as the long winter approached, whispers spread through the mortal lands. Armies had begun to march across the frozen border, seeking to conquer the north and plunder the treasures buried beneath the ice. Among them was King Vareth, the last descendant of the very bloodline that had betrayed Kaelin all those centuries ago. The winds carried his golden banners into the Bone Knight's forsaken dominion. From the heights of the glacier cliffs, Kaelin watched them come. His hollow eyes burned with a spectral fire, a cold flame that had waited ages for this moment. "The blood of kings returns," he whispered, his voice a hollow echo that seemed to come from the grave itself. He looked down at the great wolf by his side. "Shall we greet them, my old friend?" Frostbane growled, the sound like thunder rolling through distant mountains. Snow rose around them in swirling clouds, drawn by the wolf's ancient fury. Master and beast became one with the storm, a living blizzard of righteous rage. Together, they descended from the cliffs to meet their destiny. The mortal soldiers did not see them at first. They trudged through the deep snow, their torches flickering like dying embers, their hearts heavy and weary from the cold. Then the wind shifted. A sudden unnatural chill pierced their armor, and the night itself seemed to rise against them. Out of the blizzard came two burning lights, twin orbs of starlight that pierced the veil of frost. The ground trembled beneath their feet. Then came the wolf, massive, terrible, its jaws glinting like a freshly forged blade. And upon its back rode the armored revenant, his crimson cloak snapping like an open wound against the white world. "Who dares cross into the realm of the damned?" The Bone Knight's voice boomed, echoing across the desolate wastes. It was a sound that shook men to their very souls. "Turn back, mortals, lest your souls be bound to the frost forever." The soldiers faltered, their courage turning to ice in their veins. Fear crept into their ranks, a cold more piercing than any blizzard. But King Vareth, shielded by his pride, rode forward, his hand gripping the hilt of his sword. "We come for what is ours," he shouted, his voice defiant against the howl of the wind. "The north belongs to no specter. Step aside, Wraith, or I shall scatter your bones upon the wind." Kaelin stared at the mortal king, and in that moment, something deep within his hollow chest stirred, a flicker of recognition. That voice, that arrogant pride, it was the same that had condemned him centuries ago, now reborn in another face. The cycle had finally come full circle. The sin of the past had returned to be judged. "Then come," said the Bone Knight, his voice devoid of all emotion but the cold promise of the grave. "Let us end what your forefathers began." The battle that followed was not a clash of armies, but a storm of death and despair. Frostbane tore through the ranks of soldiers like a tempest unleashed, his claws cracking shields and his jaws shattering men. Arrows broke harmlessly upon his hide. The soldiers' magic, their desperate fire, froze in midair, snuffed out by the wolf's icy breath. The Bone Knight moved with an unholy grace, his sword, the blade of vows, cleaving through armor as though it were mere silk. Wherever he rode, frost bloomed in his wake. Wherever his sword fell, an eternal silence followed. Yet King Vareth pressed on, driven by a desperate mix of fury and fear. He was no coward. He struck with courage, his enchanted blade flashing with spells forged by southern magi. When his steel met the Bone Knight's, the clash resounded like thunder, shaking the very heavens. "You are no god!" Vareth cried, his voice strained as he parried a blow that nearly threw him from his horse. "You are a relic, a curse upon this land." The Bone Knight paused, his skeletal gaze piercing the king's soul. "And you," Kaelin replied, his hollow voice trembling not with rage, but with a profound, ancient sorrow, "are its last sin." With a final shattering blow, the Bone Knight struck. The blade of vows found its mark. The king fell from his horse, his golden crown scattering across the blood-stained snow, its jewels fading in the pale, ghostly light. As Vareth's life ebbed away, his gaze met the hollow sockets of the knight who had ended him. He had to know. "What are you?" the dying king whispered, his last breath a cloud of vapor in the cold air. Kaelin lowered his sword, the fire in his eyes dimming as he stared down at the mortal whose bloodline had doomed him. For a long moment, silence hung heavy in the air, broken only by the whimpering of the dying. "Once," the Bone Knight said, his voice finally free of its hollow echo, carrying a hint of the man he used to be, "I was justice." He turned away as Frostbane, his loyal companion, lifted his muzzle to the sky and howled, a mournful, endless cry that carried across the tundra, a song of sorrow and release. As the wolf's cry faded, the storm began to still. The swirling snow settled gently upon the fallen, and for the first time in an age, the soft colors of dawn touched the horizon. Vengeance had been fulfilled, the curse had weakened, but peace did not come. As the first rays of sunlight broke over the ice, the Bone Knight felt his ancient armor tremble. Glowing cracks spiderwebbed across its blackened steel surface, and a pale light shone through the seams. The dark magic that had bound him to this world for centuries was beginning to unravel. His purpose was complete. He looked skyward, where the aurora borealis shimmered like a bridge between worlds. "It is time," he whispered. Frostbane turned to him, the ancient stars in the wolf's eyes gleaming with a deep and profound sorrow. The knight placed a gauntleted hand upon the wolf's great head, a final silent farewell. "You have been my only companion, my only truth in this long darkness. Guard this land, old friend. Let no darkness rise here again." With those final words, the Bone Knight stepped into the light and vanished. His armor fell to the snow, empty, its powerful runes fading to silence. The myth was over. Frostbane remained alone upon the silent, dawn-lit tundra. He lifted his gaze to the heavens one last time, then turned and vanished back into the storm, his mournful howl echoing through eternity, a timeless reminder of the vow that once bound a man to vengeance and a wolf to sorrow. And in the endless white of the north, the legend of the Bone Knight and the Wolf of Winter lived on. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please consider liking the video and subscribing for more tales from the edge of imagination. Until next time, stay curious. Before the first empires etched their stories in stone, before humanity dared to name the constellations, there was only the red sun, a colossal blood-red eye gazing down upon a world born from its merciless light. From its stare came the deserts, vast, silent oceans of dust where time itself seemed to dissolve into sand. In this ancient age, when the divine and the mortal walked the same earth, the red sun chose its servants. They were beings caught between worlds, neither fully human nor God. They became the priests of the red sun, heralds of a terrible, perfect balance. Their faces remained forever hidden behind pale, emotionless masks, each marked with crimson sigils said to be painted in the blood of the very first dawn. Beneath those masks, there were no mortal eyes, only an abyss of darkness. They had willingly surrendered their sight to the sun, and in that ultimate sacrifice, they were granted the vision of truth, the power to see the sins and destinies woven into every living soul. They wandered the great deserts in absolute silence, their footsteps leaving no trace upon the shifting sands. They were draped in robes of woven gold and scarlet thread, carrying relics of immense celestial power. Amulets forged from the heart of a fallen meteor, pendants etched with the forgotten prayers of extinct civilizations. Each shimmering ornament was a memory, a testament to a world that had been judged and found wanting. But the priests were never truly alone. At their side walked the hounds of eternity, towering beings with the forms of men but the heads of sacred, formidable beasts. Their fur shone like sun-bleached stone, their eyes burned with a divine, unwavering purpose. Legend says that each hound was bound to a priest by an oath as old as creation itself, a living embodiment of both loyalty and wrath. When the priest spoke, the hounds listened. When the hounds howled, the heavens themselves trembled in fear. Then came the age of the third dawn. Humanity, no longer content with mere survival, began to build temples from sand and bone. But with their cities rose a new, dangerous force: arrogance. They ceased to look to the heavens with reverence and instead looked with ambition. Kings declared themselves gods. Sorcerers sought to harness forbidden light. The sky itself grew dim, choked with the smoke of mortal pride. And so, the red sun stirred from its long slumber. A storm, the likes of which the world had never known, swept across the desert, turning day into an oppressive night and the sky into a tapestry of flame. From the heart of this celestial tempest, the priests emerged once more, their golden robes glinting ominously beneath the burning sky. The people of the desert, witnessing this awesome sight, fell to their knees. They believed the gods had finally come to bless them. But the priests did not offer blessings. In a chorus of 1,000 synchronized voices they whispered, a sound that carried on the wind to every corner of the land. "We are not your saviors. We are your mirror." Their words were law. Their silence was judgment. One by one they stood before the great cities of men. When they raised their hands, the hounds of eternity lifted their heads and let loose a howl, a sound so pure and so terrible it shattered glass, broke the will of armies, and silenced the world. Those who had built their lives on deceit felt their hearts crumble to ash. The proud and the mighty were stripped of their crowns. The greedy watched as their hoarded gold melted into worthless dust. Wherever the priests passed, truth was laid bare. Every secret, every betrayal, every hidden sin was dragged kicking and screaming into the inescapable light of the red sun. No fortress could hide it, no shadow could contain it. And as mortals wept in the face of their own reflections, the priests simply turned and walked on, their masks unchanging, their gaze unseen. But not all accepted this judgment. In the magnificent city of Anukar, a king named Sareth stood in defiance. He gathered his armies, raised his sword to the sky, and declared, "No god shall rule me, I am the son of men." He ordered his soldiers to slay the priests, to tear away their masks and expose the faces hidden beneath. The first soldier lunged, his blade arcing towards a priest's robe. But the moment the steel made contact, it didn't cut. It dissolved into a flash of blinding light. The hounds of eternity rose to their full, terrifying height, their jaws unhinged with a roar that seemed to split the very fabric of the sky. What followed was not a battle, but a reckoning. The sands around Anukar turned crimson. The city burned for 7 days and 7 nights, a funeral pyre for arrogance, until nothing remained but a wasteland of blackened, molten glass. From that day forward, no living thing ever grew where Anukar once stood. Travelers who dared approach the ruins at dusk claimed they could still hear the desolate howls of the hounds carried on the wind, a chilling, eternal warning to all who would dare defy the red sun's will. After the fall of Anukar, the priests withdrew once more into the heart of the endless desert. Mortals whispered that they had returned to the Temple of the Horizon, a mythical place beyond the edge of time, where the sun itself descends to drink the blood of the earth. There, it was said, the priests wait, patiently, for the coming of the final eclipse, when all light will fade, and the last, ultimate judgment will begin. Centuries bled into millennia. Empires rose and fell. Languages were born and died. The relentless desert swallowed every trace of those who had once challenged the heavens. The priests of the Red Sun faded from history into myth. Their image became a symbol, painted on the banners of conquerors, carved into the tombs of kings, invoked by zealots who had forgotten the true meaning of their power. Yet some still claim to see them. When the sun burns a deep, angry red at dusk, and the horizon bleeds across the sands, desert travelers have spoken of 5 figures walking through the shimmering heat mirage. One in the center, masked and radiant, flanked by 4 towering bestial guardians. Their robes shimmer like liquid fire, and the soft clinking of their ornaments sounds like chains of remembrance. They do not speak, but their very presence chills the soul to its core. Those who accidentally meet their gaze, though no eyes can be seen, feel the crushing weight of everything they have ever done, and everything they will ever do. In that instant, many fall to their knees, overwhelmed by tears of unbearable clarity. Some flee screaming into madness. The priests simply pass them by, neither condemning nor forgiving. Their task is not vengeance, it is truth. For truth itself is the red sun, eternal, merciless, and unblinking. And when the final eclipse finally comes, when the sky grows dark and the stars hide their faces in fear, the priests of the red sun shall walk the earth one last time. Behind them will stride their hounds, their collars gleaming with trapped starlight. They will stand before the gates of every city, every palace, every temple, and whisper the same words spoken at the dawn of time. We are not your saviors. We are your mirror. And under their gaze, the world will finally, truly see itself, and burn with the glorious, agonizing light of truth. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the lore of the Red Sun. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe for more tales from Forgotten Worlds. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious. They say the forest of Duskvale is older than memory itself, a labyrinth of trees so ancient their roots have tasted the bones of forgotten gods. When night falls and the moon turns hollow, casting its ghostly glow upon the mist, none dare to tread its paths, for that is when he awakens. The villagers call him the Wraith of the Hollow Moon, though none living have seen his face and returned to tell the tale. Only whispers remain, stories traded in hushed voices beside dying hearths. They speak of a figure cloaked in shadow and blood, with claws like forged blades and eyes that burn with the fire of the condemned. He moves between the trees like smoke, his breath colder than the grave. And when he comes, the forest itself seems to shudder. But the Wraith was not always a monster. Long ago, before the curse took hold, he was Kael Draven, captain of the Moonwatch, a proud warrior sworn to protect the northern realms. Under the light of the full moon, his blade never faltered, and his loyalty was as unyielding as the steel he carried. Yet pride is a cruel seed, and betrayal often blooms from the most unexpected places. Kael had a brother, Arin, a scholar, frail and kind-hearted, devoted to the ancient arts. While Kael guarded the kingdom with sword and shield, Arin guarded its wisdom, the sacred texts that kept the darkness at bay. One bitter winter night, Kael learned that his brother had uncovered a secret buried deep within those texts, a ritual to draw power from the moon itself. With it, a man could transcend mortality. Blinded by ambition, Kael begged his brother to share the knowledge, but Arin, his face etched with worry, refused. Such power, he warned, does not lift men, it consumes them. But Kael's heart was already tainted. He couldn't hear reason. He could only hear the siren song of immortality. Under the pale, watchful moon, he betrayed his own blood. In a moment of madness, he slew his brother and took the scrolls for himself. He carried them deep into the Duskvale woods, the forbidden words a poison on his tongue. As he spoke them, the wind died. The trees held their breath. The moon turned hollow. And in that chilling silence, Kael Draven ceased to be a man. The lunar light poured into him, not as a blessing, but as a searing fire. It stripped flesh from bone, twisting his soul into a knot of pure shadow. His cries echoed through the forest as his heart turned black and hollow as the moon above. The ancient scrolls turned to ash in his hands, and from that ash rose a voice, the voice of the forest itself. "You sought the light," it whispered, the sound rustling through every leaf. "Now you will guard it forever." And so, Kale became the wraith of the hollow moon, cursed to wander the forest for eternity, bound by an unbearable guilt and a relentless hunger. His soul became his prison, and his hunger. It was not for flesh, but for memory. He fed on remembrance itself, devouring the lives of those who dared recall the name Kale Draven. Every whisper, every tale, every mention of who he once was, all of it drew him closer. To remember him was to awaken him, and to awaken him was to be unmade. Centuries passed. Villages rose and fell beyond the forest's edge. Travelers vanished beneath the ancient boughs, their names and faces fading from the world as though they had never been. A chilling warning was passed down through generations. Speak not of the hollow moon, and it shall not see you. The story of Kale Draven was becoming the very thing he hunted, a forgotten memory. But curiosity, as they say, is a cruel companion. One night, beneath a sickly silver sky, a young woman named Alara wandered into the mist. She was a scholar, much like Aaron had been, chasing whispers of lost magic and forgotten lore. The villagers had begged her not to go, but she sought truth above all things, and truth in Duskvale is a hungry thing. As she stepped beneath the ancient canopy, a profound silence fell. Not even the wind dared to stir. The air grew cold, and the gnarled trees loomed like silent watching specters. She pressed on, clutching a lantern close, its small light trembling against the oppressive darkness. Then came the whisper. It seemed to come from everywhere, and nowhere. "Why do you remember my name?" Alara froze, her blood turning to ice. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice barely a tremor in the stillness. The fog parted, and from its depths emerged a figure, tall, gaunt, shrouded in the tattered remains of crimson cloth. His hair hung in tangled matted strands, but his eyes blazed like molten gold. His claws, long and sharp, gleamed in the lantern's glow, and his mouth was twisted into something between a snarl and a plea. "You spoke it," he hissed, the sound like wind through a grave. "You remembered." Ilara stumbled back, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I only came seeking the truth." The wraith's voice was a mournful echo. "Truth is a wound that never heals. I was a man once, and now I am the shadow that devours memory." She raised her lantern, its light flaring as if in defiance. For a heartbeat, she saw something flicker in his tormented face, a sorrow so deep and endless it stole her breath. "Then let me help you," she whispered, her fear giving way to a strange compassion. "Let me set you free." The wraith let out a laugh, a hollow, broken sound that echoed the emptiness of the moon above. "Freedom? There is no freedom from the hollow moon, only silence." He lunged, his claws reaching for her heart, intent on erasing the memory that gave him form, but he stopped. His hand froze inches from her chest. The light from her lantern had flared again, revealing a small, tarnished pendant at her throat. Inscribed upon it was a single name, Aaron Draven. Kyle staggered back as though he'd been physically struck. The fire in his golden eyes dimmed, replaced by a flicker of disbelief. "That name," he rasped, his voice cracking. "How do you know it?" Ilara stepped forward, her fear gone. "He was my ancestor. His journals spoke of you, of the brother who betrayed him, but whom he still loved, even in death." The forest fell utterly silent. The wraith trembled, not with rage, but with a feeling he had not known for an eternity, remorse. The moon above began to wane, its ghostly light faltering as if in sympathy. "If he forgave me," Kale whispered, his voice full of 1,000 years of pain, "then let the curse end." The forest seemed to exhale, a sound like 1,000 leaves sighing in unison. The wraith's body began to dissolve, scattering like smoke into the returning mist. His golden eyes faded, and the hollow moon dimmed, leaving only the faint, hopeful glow of dawn on the horizon. Alara stood alone, the pendant warm against her chest. Behind her the forest seemed lighter, the shadows thinner, the silence less cruel. The wraith of the hollow moon was gone. But still, on cold nights when the moon hangs pale and empty, some claim to hear a voice in the fog, soft, sorrowful, and finally free. Remember me, not as a monster, but as a man. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the shadows. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell for more tales from the darkness. Until next time, stay curious. On any map you might find, one place is missing. It was wiped from memory long before the first cartographer ever put ink to parchment. But still, whispers of it survive among weary travelers. They speak of a city where the air itself shivers with dread, where a blood-red moon hangs eternally over broken spires, and where two black hounds, their eyes burning with hellfire, guard the threshold between the living and the damned. No mortal dares to linger near its gates. The hounds are always there, waiting. They never bark, never growl, never lunge. They simply watch. And when their prey falters, when courage shatters into fear, those glowing eyes are the last thing seen before silence claims another fool. But silence cannot hold forever. His name was Kalen, a wanderer who had walked through deserts that could bake the marrow in your bones, through forests where shadows whispered names he had never dared to speak aloud. He had crossed mountains littered with the skeletons of the dead. Yet none of these trials had unsettled him like the narrow, silent streets of the forgotten city. His boots struck the cracked stone, the sound echoing into a profound stillness. The air smelled of ancient ash and rust, as though a great fire had long ago consumed everything worth saving. He instinctively touched the heavy chain at his belt, the only weapon he truly trusted. In the distance, he saw them, two black silhouettes against the faint crimson glow emanating from the city's heart. Their eyes burned like embers fanned by a phantom breath. They looked as if they were carved from shadow and flame, twin statues bound in an eternal, watchful repose. Kalen felt their presence long before he got close. The sheer weight of their gaze pressed against his ribs, slowing his steps until each one was a deliberate effort. His throat went dry, but he pressed forward. His journey was not for himself. He carried a prophecy. Long ago, this city was a jewel of devotion, a place where scholars and priests claimed they could hear the very voice of the divine. But their God demanded more than just prayers. It demanded sacrifice. The priests, drunk on their own reverence, offered not lambs or cattle, but the blood of their own people. The streets ran red, and the city burned with feverish chants of obedience. Yet still, their God was not satisfied. When the first screams of rebellion finally rose, when mothers wept over their lifeless children, and fathers raised swords against the temple, the God answered their defiance not with words, but with a curse. The city crumbled into shadow, sealed away from the world of men. Its towers smoldered, but never fell. Its moon burned, but never set. And from the black flame of this divine wrath, two guardians were born, hounds whose purpose was neither mercy nor vengeance, but silence. They were created to keep the world out, and to keep the city's terrible secret in. Kalen stopped at the base of the grand avenue leading toward the hounds. Their massive forms shifted in the dim light, statuesque yet undeniably alive. Their nostrils flared, their powerful chests rising and falling in perfect, unnerving unison. He remembered the words of the oracle who had sent him here. Only the one who carries grief greater than fear may pass. Kalen did not fear death, not after everything he had lost. His village had been razed to the ground in a single night by raiders who bore no flag and showed no mercy. His daughter's laugh, his wife's song, all turned to ash. All that remained for him was the searing memory of fire. So he had sought this place, the forgotten city, chasing whispers of a power hidden within its walls, a power great enough to turn back fate itself. The hounds shifted. One lifted its massive head. The other rose silently to its feet. Their eyes flared like furnaces, and the silence thickened until Kalen swore he could hear his own heartbeat cracking in his chest. He took a step forward. The first hound moved with a slow, dreadful inevitability, padding into the center of the street. Its shadow stretched out long and thin, swallowing Kalen's feet. A low, guttural growl rumbled from its chest, a sound like stone grinding against stone. Kalen gripped his chain. He had fought beasts before, wolves, bears, and men whose cruelty made them less than human. But this was no creature of flesh and blood. This was something born from the very marrow of fear itself. The hound lunged. Kalen swung the chain, its heavy steel links sparking against the stone ground. The weapon struck the creature's flank, but it passed through as if striking smoke. The hound's jaws clamped down, not on his flesh, but on his memory. Kalen staggered, his mind flooded with images he fought daily to suppress. His wife's final scream, his daughter's small hand outstretched towards him, the hungry flames devouring their home. The hound was feeding, drawing strength directly from his grief. With a roar of defiance, Kalen wrapped the chain around his own arm, anchoring himself in the present. "You cannot take what I give freely," he shouted into the suffocating silence. "My grief is mine." The hound froze. Its fiery eyes dimmed for a moment. Slowly it stepped aside. But the trial was not over. The second hound rose. This one was larger, its eyes colder, less like flame and more like frozen embers. It did not lunge. It only watched, and the silence deepened until Kalen felt as though sound itself had been stripped from the world. His breath made no noise. His boots made no echo. Even his thoughts seemed hushed, muffled. Then, within that absolute silence, a voice spoke, not in words, but in a crushing, undeniable weight inside his mind. "Why do you seek what lies within?" Kalen's lips moved, but no sound came out. His answer was carved into his heart. "To undo what has been lost. To burn those who destroyed my blood." The hound's gaze narrowed. The silence pressed in tighter, becoming suffocating, crushing. His bones ached. His vision blurred. He felt himself unraveling, piece by piece, but he remembered the oracle's words once more. Only grief greater than fear. Kalen dropped to his knees. He bowed his head. He did not fight the silence. He embraced it. "I am already hollow," he whispered into the void, though no sound escaped his lips. "What more can you possibly take from me?" And just like that, the silence shattered. The hound stepped aside. Its eyes dimmed, though faint embers lingered, still watching. Kalen staggered to his feet, his chest heaving, his skin clammy. His limbs felt heavy as lead, but he had passed. The great gates of the citadel yawned open before him. Flames danced in its high windows, casting grotesque shadows from forgotten towers. The city pulsed as though it were alive, its heart beating in a slow rhythm with the burning moon above. Kalen did not smile. He did not celebrate. He only walked forward, carrying his grief not as a burden, but as a weapon. The hounds lay back down upon the stones, their eternal vigil unbroken. For the city did not belong to him. Not yet. Within its walls waited something older than vengeance, older even than gods, a power that could rewrite the very marrow of existence. And Kalen, broken though he was, stepped willingly into its embrace. The hounds remained at their post, unblinking, unyielding. The silence returned, as deep and eternal as ever. Another soul had passed their test, and the city had welcomed him. The moon did not set. The embers did not die, and the forgotten city waited, as it always had, for the next grief-stricken wanderer to come and test the eyes of fire. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the forgotten city. If you enjoyed this story, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more tales from the shadows. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious. The blood-red sky hung like a gaping wound above the world, its eerie light staining the jagged cliffs and the ancient stones of the bridge. They say the sun once rose here, golden and kind, but that was before the Spider Queen claimed this valley. Now daylight doesn't dare return. The bridge itself is a relic, all that remains of an empire swallowed by ruin. Its stones are cracked, its arches leaning like the bones of a long-dead giant. Few souls even approach it willingly, for the Spider Queen's shadow rules this path, her webs glistening like silver veins in the scarlet air. Those who have tried to cross, well, they never returned. Their belongings, rusted swords, broken packs, shattered boots, litter the rocks below, a grim warning etched in decay. And yet, despite the warnings, despite the certain doom, one man came. His name was Darien. His boots struck the broken path with purpose, even as a primal fear gnawed at his bones. He carried no noble banner, bore no famous name, and had no company of soldiers at his back. All he had was a satchel, a rusted blade, and the memory of screams that refused to leave him. His village had been taken in the dead of night. It wasn't raiders and it wasn't fire. It was the brood, shadows with 8 legs and a terrifying hunger in their fangs, pouring down from the cliffs like a tide of living death. They dragged mothers and children into the abyss, their cries smothered beneath a symphony of chittering. Darien had only been spared by a cruel twist of fate, trapped beneath the corpse of a fallen friend. When he finally crawled free at dawn, the valley was silent, empty, except for the trail of webbing that led directly toward the bridge, toward her, the Spider Queen. As Darien approached the great stone arch, the air grew colder. Webs clung to the rocks like ghostly fingers, sticky threads trembling in the wind, whispering as if they were alive. He paused at the threshold, his heart hammering against his ribs. The bridge stretched before him, a broken spine of stone and dark moss, leading to a cavern carved into the cliffside. It yawned like the mouth of some forgotten god. And there, waiting in the shadows of that mouth, she was. The Spider Queen's body was vast, black as obsidian, her legs long enough to span the bridge in a single terrifying step. Her fangs glistened with venom, and her abdomen pulsed with a sinister red light. Countless eyes glittered from the monstrous darkness of her form. But it was her face that truly froze Darien's blood. Above the chittering mandibles and the rows of eyes, the visage of a woman emerged. Pale, unnervingly beautiful, and exquisitely cruel. Her lips curved into a smile that was too perfect, too sharp. "Another pilgrim," she purred, her voice a chorus of whispers that seemed to come from every direction at once. "Come to cross my bridge?" Darien gripped the hilt of his blade, the cold steel a small comfort. "I've come for my people. You took them." The Spider Queen tilted her head, and her laughter echoed like the sound of tearing silk. "They walk with me now, little man. My children hunger, and I feed them well." Darien took a defiant step onto the bridge, his legs trembling. The ancient stones groaned under his weight, protesting the intrusion. "I will not leave without them," he said. His voice shook, but the words were solid, forged in grief and determination. The Queen's smile widened. "Bravery, or is it despair? Both taste the same to me." Her long legs shifted, and the entire bridge trembled violently under her immense weight. She leaned in close, her pale human-like face just inches from his own. Her breath was cold, carrying the scent of dust and old blood. "But I am merciful," she whispered, the sound a chilling caress. "Cross my bridge, and if you survive, your people may yet be free. Fail, and you will join them, body and soul." Darien swallowed hard, the lump in his throat feeling like a stone. He knew the stories. No one survived her trials, but the fire of his grief burned hotter than any fear. He gave a single, resolute nod. The bargain was struck. The bridge shook as the Queen withdrew back into the cavern's shadows. Her voice slithered across the stones, a venomous promise. "Walk, wanderer. Walk, and let us see if your heart is strong enough." Darien took his first step. Immediately, the stone beneath his boot crumbled, and a chunk of the bridge plummeted into the abyss below. He steadied himself, forcing a deep breath into his lungs. He took another step, then another. The path was a minefield of loose rock and decay. Then, the webs began to stir. Shapes descended from the cavern ceiling. Spiders, each the size of a large hound. Their legs clicked against the stone with a sound like cracking bones, and their multifaceted eyes glittered with a ravenous hunger. Darien roared and swung his blade. Steel met chitin, and sparks flew into the red-tinged air. One creature shrieked as he cleaved its leg, black ichor spraying across the stones. Another one leapt, its fangs snapping inches from his face. He shoved his blade upward, impaling it through the mouth. But it was a hopeless fight. For every spider he cut down, two more appeared, their bodies clogging the narrow bridge, their shrieks becoming a deafening chorus of hate. Darian stumbled backward, his breath coming in ragged gasps, his arms shaking from exhaustion. He couldn't win. Not against all of them. He was going to die here. And then, a memory surfaced, the last words of a dying priest from his village, whispered with his final breath. She does not fear steel. She fears sacrifice. The brood swarmed him, a living wave of chittering death, forcing Darian back toward the edge of the broken bridge. His heel slipped on a loose, blood-slicked stone. The abyss gaped below, an endless, hungry void. He looked at his blade, dull, bloodied, and ultimately useless. He looked at his own arms, scarred, tired, and hopelessly mortal. And in that moment of desperation, he finally understood. With a raw cry that split the oppressive silence, Darian dropped his sword. He pulled a small knife from his belt and slashed it across his own palm. Blood, bright and vivid, spilled across the dark stones, staining the black webbing a brilliant crimson. Instantly, the spiders froze. The entire horde went still, their bodies trembling as one, their fangs clicking in a strange, unified rhythm. The queen's voice filled the air again, this time sharp and laced with an undeniable hunger. Ah, sacrifice. Her vast body shifted, and her pale face emerged once more from the deep shadows of the cave. Her human eyes glowed with a predatory light, an ancient need now awakened. You would give yourself to me? She asked, her voice dripping with a mix of mockery and genuine curiosity. Darian lifted his bleeding hand, presenting it to her like an offering. Take me, he declared, his voice steady now. But release them. Release my people. For the first time since he had arrived, the Spider Queen hesitated. Her eyes flickered, and her venomous fangs dripped poison onto the stones below. The brood around her stirred restlessly, sensing the shift in their queen's demeanor. Then she laughed. It was a sound that seemed to split the red sky, a cascade of cruel amusement. So be it, she hissed. One soul for many. A bargain struck. Her impossibly long legs wrapped around Darian, lifting him effortlessly into the air. Her fangs hovered just above his chest, the venom burning cold against his skin before it even pierced him. His blood dripped onto the stones of the bridge, and where it fell the thick webs trembled and parted. From the dark cavern beyond, figures began to stumble out into the light. The villagers. They were pale, starved, and terrified, but they were alive. They blinked at the blood-red sky as the magical chains binding their wrists crumbled to dust and fell away. A faint smile touched Darian's lips, even as the queen's venom seared into his veins. His people were free. The last thing he saw was the Spider Queen's beautiful, terrible face, her smile widening as his heartbeat faltered and faded into silence. The villagers fled that cursed valley and never looked back. For generations, they told the story of the man who bought their freedom with his own blood, a wanderer whose name would not be forgotten. But the bridge still stands. The sky is still red, and the Spider Queen still waits, her brood whispering in the shadows, her hunger never truly sated. Because even though one man's sacrifice freed a village, the bridge always demands a toll. And sooner or later, another wanderer will come. Thank you so much for joining me on this dark journey today. If you enjoyed this story, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel for more tales from the shadows. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay safe and watch your step. Tonight we venture into a place where the moon's light fears to tread, a place where the wind holds its breath and the birds dare not sing. This is the story of the cursed grove and the terrifying secret it holds. In the heart of this forsaken wood stands a tree unlike any other, the Hollow Sentinel. Half wood, half flesh, and wholly cursed. The villagers speak of it in hushed tones, warning their children never to wander near when the moon is full. For on that night, the sentinel awakens. Its bark splits open, revealing molten veins of red light. A monstrous face, twisted with ancient rage, emerges from the trunk. Its eyes burn with a ghostly fire, and its knotted arms tear free from the earth, clawing the soil with splintered fingers. But this monster wasn't always a tree. The elders' tales speak of a man named Dravik, a mighty warrior consumed by his thirst for glory. He abandoned the old gods, making a pact with darker powers for strength beyond mortal limits. His flesh became unyielding, his power immense, but his heart turned to stone. He waged war on his own kin, his cruelty becoming a dark legend. The gods themselves intervened, striking him down, but his rage was so great that not even death could contain it. So they bound him, cursing him into the form of a tree, his body becoming bark, his veins turning to sap and fire. Trapped for eternity, his spirit seething, waiting. Thus, the Hollow Sentinel was born. Generations came and went, and the village thrived just beyond the grove's edge. The stories became campfire tales, meant to scare children. But for one young woman, Ira, they were an invitation. Bold and restless, she laughed at the villagers' fears. The idea of a cursed warrior trapped in a tree thrilled her more than it frightened her. She often dared her friends to approach the grove, though she never stepped inside herself. But the mystery gnawed at her, pulling her closer to the darkness. One night, during the harvest festival, as the moon rose fat and bright, Ira slipped away. Carrying only a lantern, she walked the path into the forest, her heart a drumbeat of fear and excitement. The world grew unnervingly quiet. No cricket sang, no leaves rustled. The grove itself seemed to be holding its breath. When she finally reached the clearing, her lantern flickered. There it stood, a colossal gnarled tree, scarred and ancient. Faint red cracks glowed along its trunk, like embers pulsing just beneath the surface. Ira stared, captivated. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, the ground began to tremble. The tree shuddered, and a deep, guttural groan echoed through the clearing. Ira gasped as the cracks widened, spilling molten light. A face pushed itself from the trunk, snarling, its eyes igniting with a furious, otherworldly fire. Roots tore from the soil, twisting into massive limbs that reached for her. The Hollow Sentinel was awake. The tales were true. The monster's burning gaze fixed upon her, its voice a thunderous roar. Another mortal daring to trespass. You carry the same arrogance as those before you. The gods curse me, but they curse you all as well. Blood calls for blood. Ira stumbled back, but the ground cracked open at her feet, glowing veins spreading like fissures of fire. The air grew heavy, pressing down on her, the weight of the Sentinel's ancient hatred threatening to crush her spirit. Yet something inside her, stubbornness, pride, or maybe destiny, made her stand her ground. "Why do you hate us?" she shouted over the monstrous roar. "We did nothing to you." The Sentinel bared its jagged maw. "Nothing? You thrive while I rot in chains. Your kind forgets, but I remember. I fought for power and they feared me. They bound me here, cursed to hunger, cursed to wait. And you dare ask why I hate?" Ira's blood ran cold. She realized her village's peace was bought with his eternal torment. The monster's massive, gnarled hand stretched toward her. "Join me, mortal. Feed me your spirit, and I will rise again." Ira raised her lantern, its weak flame a defiant spark against the Sentinel's raging glow. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling but firm. "If you were once a man, then somewhere inside you, there must be something more than rage. You were cursed, yes, but curses are made to be broken, not spread." Her words hung in the charged air. For a fleeting moment, the Sentinel hesitated. The red glow in its cracks dimmed, and its monstrous face twisted not with fury, but with something like pain, as if a long-forgotten memory had stirred. Then, with a roar that shook the very foundations of the grove, it slammed its claws into the earth. The cracks sealed, the fire vanished, and the monstrous face retreated back into the bark. The grove fell silent once more. Ira collapsed to her knees, gasping for breath as her lantern sputtered and died. In the distance, the village bells rang out, signaling the stroke of midnight. Shaken but alive, she stumbled back home. She never spoke of what happened that night. She knew the sentinel still slept in the grove, a prisoner of its own rage, but she also knew her words had reached something deep inside it. From that night on, once every year, under the full moon, Era would return to the edge of the grove. She never went too close, but she would stand in the stillness and whisper. Sometimes she thought she saw the faintest flicker of red in the tree's scars, a silent acknowledgement as though the sentinel was listening. The villagers continued their warnings, unaware that a fragile thread now connected human and monster. Pity and rage, curse and a flicker of hope. The grove remained dark and silent, waiting. And that's where our tale ends, suspended in the quiet darkness of the cursed grove. What do you think would happen if the sentinel ever broke free? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey into the shadows, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more stories. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.